Hello, my name is John Cornicello, and I welcome you to my series of interactive photo conversations. You can check out the schedule at cornicello.com/conversations for dates and times of upcoming shows. Guests coming up are Pratik Naik, Holger Mishke, Harold Davis, Roman Lawrence, and a few more. I want to mention a couple of things before we start. First is my book, Anatomy of a Studio Portrait, is available on print via Amazon or as a PDF from Photo Woe. I'll put a link to those in the description on YouTube when we post this. So today, my guest is Steve Brazill. Steve is a live performance photographer in Southern California, where he's also a radio personality on KCAL FM. He's also the host of Behind the Shot podcast, and he does workshops. So without further ado, let me welcome Steve Brazill.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. Just making my Zoom window bigger so I can see everybody.
Yeah, you got some good California weather going on?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's been wonderful down here.
As you can see here in Seattle, it's nice blue skies with puffy clouds.
Something inside me says that's not accurate.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So music photography, live performance. You haven't had much work this year, have you?
No. Yeah. Once COVID hit, one of the first things to shut down was shows. Some amazing shows I had scheduled got canceled. In fact, I was going to be up in Portland actually for Rage Against the Machine's reunion tour. But everything got shut down really, really quick. So if you watch music photographers online, they're all going through their art. It's actually been good in this sense. They're all going through their archives and re-editing old pictures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how have you dealt with it?
Kind of the same way. First of all, just buried myself in the podcast. The podcast keeps me really, really busy. As you know, it takes a lot of time to line up guests and get everything ready and stuff like that. But for me, a lot of it, because I still want to post content, but I'm not shooting any shows, has been going through old shows and looking at those shots that only made, 2 stars or 1 star that didn't pass the first edit, and going into Lightroom. And first thing is just changing the actual develop engine. A lot of my old shots might be, a Lightroom Develop Engine 3, and I change them to the current version, and you'd be surprised what just that will do to make you see something in a shot. But also I'm just, from when I shot some of them, I edit differently, I think differently, I see differently. And so it's fun to go back and kind of redo them.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. I'm just getting reports from some people having trouble with their cameras and stuff here. So I'm just going to.
No worries.
See if they're.
It's COVID. I'm here. I'm here for a long time.
Let me see if that works. Okay, let's go back to my notes here. It's been a rough Zoom morning. I guess the internet had some outages overnight.
Yeah, Google really... about 5 hours ago, 6 hours ago now. Google had a huge outage. To my knowledge, there are still some places, but Gmail issues, and it looks like we've got somebody coming in now. You gonna get them, or you want me?
Yeah, I got Ian.
YouTube was down, and the interesting thing with YouTube was the logins were down. But as long as you weren't logged in, you could watch.
Yeah, I saw that. Eric, if you're still having trouble, maybe drop out of the meeting and back in and see if that makes it work.
I was able to unmute, but I can't get my camera to go.
Huh. Okay. Well,
maybe try rebooting, and
we'll just imagine what you look like. As long as you can hear us.
Hold on. Yeah, you don't need to see who I am.
No, I've got Eric covered. Hold on 1 second here. I've got Eric all covered. I have no idea what Eric looks like, so this will be good.
So Ian made it in.
There's Eric's camera.
There you go.
Very good.
Very good.
Was it accurate though?
Very accurate.
So Steve, what was the first show that you photographed?
Oh, wow. That was actually an unusual one. And if anybody here has done music photography, they'll know what I mean when I say that it was unusual. So normally in music photography, you can't just walk into a show with a camera generally, especially big shows. Bars or nightclubs or smaller shows maybe, but large shows, you have to have an outlet for your pictures. You have to be media or be shooting for the venue or something like that. And then you have to apply, and then they have to approve you, and then you have to get a photo pass, et cetera, et cetera. Well, working in radio, most people don't think of it, but I'm traditional media, and every radio station has a blog. So when I first got the idea, when I first kind of got into photography, which is a longer story, that's a weird one too. But when I first kind of got interested in photography, I saw people doing music photography. And of course, growing up, some of the way I identified with all the artists that I loved, the Aerosmiths and the Led Zeppelins, et cetera, those were all based on the photos that I saw, Jim Marshall and whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to my boss at the radio station, and said, I'm kind of into photography now. Can we get photo passes for concerts? And his response was, I don't know. Ask somebody. I said, well, but when I ask somebody, they're going to want a business card, I'm sure, or something. And in radio, only salespeople get business cards. So he emailed me the station logo, said, make your own card. I made a business card. I went down to like Pip Printing here in Riverside, and I had a business card in 2 days and started applying for shows. And the first show I ever shot was Heart opening for Def Leppard.
Wow.
At the old Universal Amphitheater. And I had never shot a show. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't understand what a photo pit was. And yeah, it was fun.
Was it 3 and out still then?
Yeah. It's been 3 and out since the 70s, mostly.
Yeah.
There's a few exceptions.
So was that film or digital?
It was digital.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking 2000. Was that 2007, 2008, probably?
You're a youngster then.
Yeah, I still didn't have hair. I can't even use that one. But yeah, it was digital. And it's still, for those that don't, has anybody in here shot music before? Ian, you're muted. I saw you talking though.
Yeah, he's still trying to talk.
If you hold your space bar down, it'll unmute it.
Ian's a regular here, so there's still something going on with Zoom, I think. Let me click the ask to unmute button and see if that does it.
Yeah, that worked.
There we go.
For some reason, I couldn't unmute it on my end.
Huh.
Interestingly, I was probably at that concert shooting because I became friends with Phil Collin of Def
Who
Leppard.
lives in Southern California? Yeah.
Yeah, he lives in
Temecula.
Viejo. Been to his house a few times.
Yeah.
I did a magazine feature with him, actually for a fitness magazine that year, and we became buddies, and we did some other things together. And he invited myself and my wife to that concert, and they let me up front shooting for a little while. So that's a concert experience.
Yeah, the Universal Amphitheater this one was at.
Yes.
And for those that don't know, when John says 3 and out, the standard in music photography is you go into a photo pit, which is, if you've ever been at a concert, you'll see the edge of the stage, then you'll see very large security guys, and then you'll see a metal barricade holding the audience back. That walkway where the security guys are right in front of the stage is the photo pit. And the standard rule in music photography is you get 3 songs from the pit, no flash. So when you apply, 90% of the time, you'll get an answer email back that says, approved, standard rules apply, 3 from the pit, no flash. So, yeah. And it's been 3 from the pit since the 70s, probably. There's a few exceptions. Joe Walsh was 2. Marilyn Manson is 1. Cage the Elephant was shoot the whole show. So there's exceptions, but normally it's 3 from the pit. Yeah.
I mean, the only one I think I ever got the actual pit for was Keith Emerson opening for the Scorpions, I think it was. And I was just there for the Keith Emerson part of the show. But back in the 70s, I used to sneak my camera in at Madison Square Garden or the Beacon in New York. So I've got early Kiss and Queen shows on film. So it's very grainy.
Well, and in those days, people did sneak cameras in all the time. I mean, some of the classic Beatles, at Shea Stadium were people who snuck cameras in. That's a little harder now with metal detectors and security and everything else. But there was some of the best pictures are people who cheated to get in.
But I guess we go back further then. You say you have an interesting story about how you got into photography.
Yeah. And I don't know if anybody else is like this, but for me, I'm a network engineer by trade. I'm an IT guy. I'm a geek. Had I known that photography was techie, I would have gotten started way, way before I did. I just don't think I knew. But when I had a son that went into high school and was in marching band and was going to be marching on the football field playing snare drum, I walked into, at the time, Ritz Camera, if anybody remembers Ritz Camera. And I looked at the guy behind the counter and I said, my son is going to be on a football field and I'm up in the stands and I want to take pictures of my son in marching band. And he brought out a little entry-level Nikon, and he brought out a Canon XTI. The Canon felt better in my hand. It's the only reason I'm a Canon shooter, is it felt better in my hand. And who do we got? Jim.
Yeah, let him in.
And then he brought out lenses. And this, still to this day, is probably what taught me more about photography than anything. He brought out two lenses. He brought out a 70-200, 2.8. This is, long ago, so it was the Mark I. And then he brought out a 70-300 f3.5 to 5.6. And he said, okay, you need one of these two lenses to go with this Canon XTI body. Which one would you like? This one's 70-300. This one's 70-200. You probably want the 70-200 one. And my idiot response was, but the camera's black and that lens is white. I can't do that. They need to match, don't they? And I said, and plus 300 is more than 200. So I'll take that one. And I bought the 70-300 variable aperture, which was the biggest mistake I've ever made. And it taught me more about photography because I'd be sitting in the stands photographing football and marching band, not understanding what was happening. I'd go home, pull my pictures up on the computer, and I would see that when I was shooting the entire football field at 70 from way up high in the stands, everything was exposed properly. And the mere act of zooming to 300 to see my son was dropping multiple stops. And I was forced at that point to understand and learn quickly, why are my pictures changing exposure just because I zoom? So I very quickly had to learn exposure triangle and had to learn reciprocals and had to better understand how everything interplays, which led perfectly into music photography, where you are in pitch dark quite often, having to adjust your camera very, very quickly without thought. So understanding those reciprocals that in effect were a mistake that I had to learn has served me quite well going into music photography. I still tell people, if you want to really learn low light action photography, put the wrong lens on your camera and go shoot it.
Well, it reminds me, in high school, I was going to take pictures at a high school band, and let's see, Ian's coming back in, and I had this old film camera that I borrowed, and it had X and MP settings on it, and for the flash. So I asked a friend what to use, and he said, "What film are you using?" I said, "Tri-X." We'll put it on X, but I was using flash bulbs, so I had a roll of blanks.
Yeah,
and it didn't sync.
But wasn't that one of the best learning experiences? Yeah. Sometimes making mistakes, intentionally or not, sometimes making mistakes will change the way that you shoot. And understanding what a variable aperture lens was doing to my shots helped me better understand depth of field, helped me better understand the relationship of an exposure triangle, and helped me better understand that as I'm sitting up in the stands photographing my kid, how to quickly adjust to anything that happened based on he walked under one of, I don't know if you've ever shot high school football, but it is literally some of the worst lighting you'll ever see in your life. And he could be in pitch dark and then walk under one of the spotlights and be blown out. That set me up for music photography, because that's music photography. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So speaking of lighting, I mean, most of the major acts have fantastic lighting rigs, and they get actually white light on the performers. I mean, some of the shots on your website are totally amazing. What about, do you have advice for people starting out in the smaller clubs where they only seem to have red gels on every light?
Well, and there are big artists that do that too. One of the toughest artists that you will ever photograph is Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie is theatrical. He's a movie director, and his shows are almost entirely solid red and or solid green light. And solid red, for example, is one of those channels on your camera that will clip before almost anything else. You can have a perfect exposure. They throw red light on and the channel, that one channel is gone. The picture's not, though. That's actually a key distinction.
Mhm.
But what I tell most people is, if you, and I'll be honest with you, I think everybody should try music photography at least once. A, it's super addicting. B, anybody can do it because every city has a club or a bar or a Elks Lodge that has a concert that you can get into without credentials. And the lighting will be horrible. And you'll have a five-person band on a stage riser the size of a king-size bed with microphones and wires and speakers coming out of every part of their head. And if you can go shoot in that kind of condition and learn to manage the background objects that are coming out of their head, manage the crazy shadows that are on their face. This is a big wedding photographer thing, actually. Manage those shadows that a microphone being right here, I don't know if I can get a shadow right now, casts on their face.
Sure.
And manage that lighting. That's a great training ground. And there's two schools of thought on what you mentioned, which is red or whatever solid color, horrible, bad lighting. Many artists, especially big artists, they pay a lighting director, right? So if you think about stops of light, depending on who you talk to, human eye is over 20 stops of light that it can generally see. And that takes into account the fact that your iris can automatically adjust, right? That your pupil can open and close dynamically. Most really good cameras are going to be somewhere between 12 to 14, maybe 15 stops of light, somewhere in there. There's no way that a camera will capture the dynamic range that your eye can see. Henceforth, the fact that we have HDR. But a lighting director's job is to push the limits, the extremes of what the human eye and senses can pick up. So when you go shoot a concert, you're going to have ridiculous dynamic range. You're going to have clipped whites. You're going to have clipped blacks. And so when you're in a nightclub, you then add into that the fact that those lights that they're using usually are really cheap LEDs. So you might even get banding at certain shutter speeds based on flicker, right? Or sync rate of the flash of the LED light. So if you can go into those clubs and figure out how to make usable, good shots, that's boot camp for concert photography.
Yeah. So if people can't unmute, let me know and I'll fix that for you. Okay, Daniel.
Oh, Daniel can't.
Let's see.
I didn't realize that the LEDs had flicker.
Yeah,
Yes.
cheap LEDs are really, really bad with it. And
Oh, cheap LEDs.
yeah, for example, very few. I won't say very few. There's still a lot, but a lot of big live shows or bigger live shows are using LEDs now instead of the old standard PAR 64 cans, which were the big metal cans. But a lot of people are using LED light, and I had never. Because of who I shoot for, I'm not on assignment for Getty where I'm having to go shoot certain things. I get to pick and choose what I shoot. I picked artists that I liked. I just never ran into the issue. But I was also a house photographer for a casino here in Southern California when they had a venue, San Manuel Indian Bingo and Casino. And I remember shooting a non-show for them once. It was one of their gambling contest winners. And as I was shooting it, I realized looking at the back of my camera that I had banding going on that you get with flicker. And I had never seen it before and didn't at the time know how to fix it. And really what it is it's a sync speed issue. So LED lights have a refresh rate. If that refresh rate is not on a sync with your shutter speed, what will happen is you will catch in between. If you think of it in slow motion, that light is literally there, gone from a refresh point of view. And so what'll happen sometimes is you'll get half a frame that's dark and half a frame that's exposed, just like, a bad flash sync.
I thought that was from the fluorescent lights.
No, it happens with LEDs.
It happens with LEDs, especially if you put your camera into silent mode or use the electronic shutter.
Yep.
For them, with a lot of LEDs and smaller clubs, I get a lot of banding throughout the whole image.
It's a reason actually early on music photographers wouldn't touch a Sony camera because the early Sony mirrorless cameras were horrible with that scenario. That's been fixed, and there's a ton of people shooting Sony cameras live now for live shows. But yeah, it can be a really bad problem, and especially if you don't know how to fix it, because here's one of the problems with live music, right? It's low light action photography. That's all that it is. So you're trying to shoot somebody that's moving. Literally, you'll be photographing. You won't see a singer. Singer's there. Singer's gone, right? And you're trying to photograph all of this. You need shutter speed to do that. But if you're limited in your shutter speed because you have to sync your shutter speed with a refresh rate of an LED light, you're suddenly handicapped.
What's the sync speed of an LED light, you know?
My guess would be that I'll be honest, I don't know. My guess would be that it would be something having to do with the electricity in that particular country. So we're 60 hertz in the US, which is why generally if you stay around 1/20th, you're fine. But I technically,
Yeah,
I
1/20th
wish
of a
Don
second.
Komarechka was here. He could answer it.
Yeah, if when you have a jumping performer, 1/20th of a second's not all that good for
Exactly.
you.
Although it can be handy. I mean, there's
Mhm.
times I've done 1/20th of a second intentionally to blur.
Yeah. For me, I've been shooting a lot of aerial performances that are lit by that, and people are moving quickly as they're flying through the air. It just doesn't work with the LED. I have to go into a normal shutter mode.
Yeah. And it would be, obviously it would be different if you're overseas where they have a 50 hertz electrical system as opposed to here where we're 60.
So what are some other frustrations you get with shooting shows?
Oh boy. So again, I can't stress it. If you've never shot live music before, once the world stops ending, go out and shoot live music. It's one of the most exciting, frustrating things you'll ever shoot. So here's a couple of things. One, for most people, it's one of the things I rail against actually, is most people photographing today still are in the habit of pulling their shots up in Capture One or Lightroom or whatever, and they'll view their pictures at 100%. And they'll freak out. There's so much noise, because I live at 3,200, right? There's times I'm at 1,600. If it's Kiss that's on stage, I'm at 800 ISO. But I live at 3,200 ISO, and I shoot a lot of shows at 6,400 ISO, and I've shot shows where I'm over 10,000. There is gonna be noise in my shots. But what I always try to remind people is the most iconic. I'm old, so I actually made a comment on Twitter the other day that I'm actually old enough to remember the number for dialing time, 853-1212. But when you are shooting shows, you have a scenario where you have to decide what's your subject. If my subject is James Taylor sitting on a stool, I'm going to care less about my shutter speed. But if my subject is Rob Zombie, who does not stand still and is running around the stage, or the band Korn, where two of the guitarists have very, very long dreads and are swinging them, and I want to freeze those, or I'm trying to photograph a drummer like Jason Bonham, and I want Jason sharp, but maybe I want a little movement in the drumstick. I have to go off my shutter speed. The only thing that matters to me in my exposure is my shutter speed. So I've got a 2.8 lens. I shoot at 2.8. I set my shutter speed for whatever my subject is that I want. And my ISO goes to whatever I need to get a proper exposure. So when I bring it up in post, I see noise. Okay. The most iconic shots of our day are noisy.
Sure.
Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston. Martin Luther King on the National Mall. Napalm Girl, if anybody's old enough to remember, the old Vietnam War pictures. You look at those pictures, nobody ever looks at those pictures and goes, wow, a lot of noise in that one, right? And my buddy Rick Salmon has a saying that I totally agree with, and it's his dad, I guess, that told it to him, and that is something I'm going to paraphrase. So Rick, I apologize if I butcher this, but it was something to the effect of, if people look at your photograph and the first thing that they see is the noise, there's something wrong with your photograph.
Yep, I've heard that one from him.
And I'm a firm believer in that. And that's one of the big frustrations in music photography for me is it's not the noise itself. It's that inexperienced music photographers, because this just doesn't happen with a lot of other genres shooting at super high ISO. Inexperienced music photographers make people look plastic, right? They do so much global noise reduction that it just ruins the effect. And I'd rather see, my mantra is a sharp, noisy shot is always better than a blurry, clean shot. Get the shutter speed that you need, put the ISO wherever you need it to be, and ignore the noise. So that's one. The other big one, well, okay, I'm going to list three really quick ones, and I apologize, I'm going on too long.
It's okay.
So as far as irritants, number one is in music photography, there's something called pit etiquette. It's talked about a lot. It's followed less and less, it seems, nowadays. But I don't know if anybody here has ever shot a wedding, but one of the cool things, I DJ'd weddings for 18 years. And one of the cool things from a photography point of view about weddings is there's one wedding photographer usually, one official wedding photographer.
Mhm.
So the wedding photographer can stand at the cake cutting as people are firing their little point and shoot flash cameras off and say, I'm going to ask everybody to hold off on shooting any pictures. Let me get the official wedding pictures. And when I'm done, I'll keep them posed for you so that you guys can take your pictures. Well, in a photo pit, that's just not the case, right? So in a photo pit, and let me do this. This will
Yeah,
make
go ahead
more
and share your
sense.
screen.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do here really quick. Let me just pull up a shot to kind of give you an idea of what it can be like. There we go. So in a photo pit, boom. So this is a photo pit at a place called Glen Helen Amphitheater here in Southern California. And I'm not sure you'll be able to see it, but you can see the stage, you can see the monitors, right? To give you an idea, and I'm going to kind of zoom in on it, that guy's wrist is sitting on a barricade, right? As are, all of these hands. And if you look back here, this guy's arms, the guy in the white t-shirt, is on a barricade. Everybody else between the guy in the white shirt and the stage is a photographer. And they all got approved by people way higher than us, as far as the pecking hierarchy. They all have every exact same right to be there, to photograph, and to stand in any position. This actually is the only photo pit I've ever been in that felt really, really dangerous, like to the point where I wanted to leave. There's some super well-known photographers in here too, actually. The hat right in front of you here, that's the original photographer for Guns N' Roses. But that's the problem with one of the irritants is if you're in that scenario, right? And you start doing, let me see if I can find a nightmare shot here. Might be able to, you know what? Let me do something else. Hold on. I'm going to pop that one off. I'm going to pull something else up here really quick. Because when you're talking about pit etiquette, let me just find the shot here really quick. This is one of the issues that you can end up having when you have a whole bunch of people. There we go. Okay, so do you see that slide, I'm assuming?
Yes.
So you see the monopod with the camera?
Yep.
That's not a good thing, right? When people are holding their cameras up high in the air, when people are, monopods are forbidden, as it were. This person's doing video, so they've got a video mic on top of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
That can absolutely kill people's shots. And everybody else has every right to get the shot. So when you start doing that, you're in their way. The way around that is if you're going to hold your camera up, in this picture, you'll see a guy on the left with a 70 to 200 telescoped out. If you move all the way back to the barricade and hold your camera up, you're not affecting anybody else's shot. Now, at that point, you are affecting the audience, and the audience paid. So you need to be careful of that. But here's my buddy Paul. And in his case, he went back to the audience and he's actually shooting the audience. Because the audience, in my opinion, is 70, 80% of a show, right? If you ever go to a concert and the band is kind of dead. Quite often that's because they're not getting the energy from the crowd. When you get the energy from the crowd, the band changes. In this case, though, I love the fact that Paul is actually shooting one direction, but protecting himself by watching the crowd surfers. Here's the thing, though. Sometimes there's nothing that you can do with people raising their camera in the air. So it's irritating at times, but you can also use that. So this is the guitarist for Cage the Elephant. And everybody went around him because he went out and leaned against the barricade. Okay, fine. I'm going to do a frame within a frame type thing. I'm going to use all of those cameras as part of the shot to tell the story.
And this is one of the bands that you said lets you shoot through the whole show.
Yeah, there's something in concerts called a photo release. And it's not a model release. So a model release is you getting permission from your subject on how you can use the pictures. In live music photography, it's a photo release. And it's different. You're walking into a private venue with a private event put on by a promotional company with bands. And some bands, many bands, will put a piece of paper in front of you that says, we are allowing you to photograph this show on the condition that you only use the pictures for editorial use. You can't use them in any commercial use, anything like that. At times, those releases will move from that standard editorial release to more controlling, such as, excuse me, you need to get permission for each and every shot. So you need to send us the pictures you want to publish, and we will approve or deny them, which a lot of newspapers won't go for because they don't want control over editorial content. And then you get people like, I always use Cheap Trick as the example because the name just so fits. And that is, I wouldn't shoot Cheap Trick. I wouldn't shoot Pat Benatar because their releases specifically state that you must, like Pat Benatar's, upload your pictures to the tour manager within 48 hours. And you are giving Benatar Giraldo, which is Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo, the guitarist and husband, a worldwide transferable commercial license in perpetuity to the shots. Now, effectively, it's a copyright grab, except that you're not giving copyright, but you're giving an unlimited license. So effectively, it's kind of the same thing because the release will say you can only use them one time for the coverage of that show, and then you can never use them again. They get a worldwide license. So for this particular show, let me stop the screen share actually. For this particular show, they came and put a release in front of us. And I read the release and it said something to the effect of, you can shoot the entire show, but if you get hurt, you can't sue us. And I looked at somebody else and I went, are you reading this like I'm reading this? Like it's literally just saying, if you fall down, it's your own problem. And sure enough, that's what it was. So we all signed it. We shot the entire show for Cage the Elephant. It's kind of funny because I oddly had very little desire originally to shoot Cage the Elephant. But like, this is the audience for Cage the Elephant. But they are absolutely amazing live. Matt Schultz, the vocalist, he spends probably 60% of the show like that, off the ground. It was just amazing. Here's the other guitarist for the band. He's in the air constantly. This one I actually call not Mick Jagger because everybody thinks it's Mick Jagger. That's Matt Schultz of Cage the Elephant. And this is actually a really good example of what a photo pit is like. This is a huge photo pit. Sometimes they're literally 2 feet deep. But that same pit where I showed you with all the people in it, that's the same pit. So if you look here, it's much thinner. You can see the photographers on the right. You can see the stage. So I wanted to tell that part of the story. But you can also see Matt in the crowd with the people.
Yeah, I notice a lot of your shots seem to have people up in the air.
Yeah. There is nothing like a good jump shot. I mean, after a while they get, a little bit like, this is one of my favorites right here. This was from Self-Help. And this is a Japanese band called One OK Rock at Self-Help Festival. And I had not heard of this band. And this is one of the reasons I tell everybody, I know people when I shoot a big show and, there'll be 5 bands, let's say. Some photographers will show up for band number 4 and 5. And my standard rule of thumb is shoot every band, shoot the openers. You get to learn the venue, you learn the lighting for that night, you get in the mood, you get warmed up. But more importantly, you don't know if that band is going to be the next Metallica and you photograph them when they were nothing. Or in this particular case, it's a band I'd never heard of from Japan. This guy, the bassist, just kept launching into the air. And at the angle I'm at, he, of course, looks higher. But seriously, this guy was getting air. Like basketball players don't jump this high. And I wanted to grab the shot. And in the shot, I wanted to keep the banner for the concert for branding in case the concert ever wanted to license it or use it. I post this on Instagram. I had to turn off my notifications for Instagram for about 3 days. This band is so big in Japan that it was being shared and tagged and commented on and liked. I couldn't take it anymore. And I'd never heard of the band.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love a good jump shot, but you know, strangely with me, I love mood more than anything. There's something to me about mood. I like to try and be artistic, but also photojournalistic. So this is the guitarist for a rapper by the name of Yellow Wolf. And there was just this really cool light behind him only, not in front of him. And I just love that look. Same with, this is actually Yellow Wolf, and he kept climbing up on the DJ stand, which was an old car, and pointing his hand up. And I'm like, if I just move 2 feet I was aware of it. If I move 2 feet to the right, I can put his finger right in the center of that spotlight. But of course, this happens in 5 seconds.
Yep.
And that's where that exposure triangle part comes in, is that you've got to be so aware. I mentioned earlier shooting Korn, the band Korn, and some of their guitarists have dreads. This is what I'm talking about. So trying to capture, I specifically, again, I moved to simply put the light right behind Brian Head Welch so that it would backlight him. And this is one where they did have white follow spots on him. So he's actually lit from the front, which is great. But I wanted the dreads to show up. I wanted that light to come out from behind him and get that kind of feel. And that's one of the things I love, is I'm always going for, in some way or another, mood. This is the lead guitarist for Judas Priest. And this is just what their concert looks like to me.
And I think on your website is the first photo Foreigner.
Oh, the Foreigner shot. Yeah, I've got
That's
that one
another
in here
great
too, actually. Let me pull that one up. I just got to find it really quick. Hold on. I should just pull the website up. It's probably faster.
I see Paul Stanley there. And
yeah, here it is right here. Yeah, this is Foreigner. And that's Bruce Watson of Foreigner. And the funny thing about this shot is you'd be surprised how many people, when you guys saw it, did you realize he's off the ground right away?
I did.
Because you can see the foot shadow in the spotlight, right? I got so lucky that foot shadow does not intersect the edge of the spotlight. There's white all the way around the heel of the shadow.
Yep.
Which is absolutely critical. Not planned, totally accidental. I'm okay with it. I'll take every chance that I get.
I even like the little red dot on the toe of the other foot.
Yes. And, this one, here's a good example actually of the nightmare of concert photography. So we go to shoot, let's see, I'm trying to think who this was. This is Deadly Apples here. And I think this was also Doobie Brothers and Santana Day. This might've been that show. It might've been a different show. But we got there and found out that it was going to be a soundboard shoot. Well, soundboard is far, far away. Luckily, I had a 400 2.8 with me. This is with a Canon 400 2.8. So I'm nowhere near this guy, which is why I'm almost above him shooting down, is because I'm at the soundboard. But he let go of the mic. It's just floating there. And now and then, you get lucky with these moments. Sometimes the moments to me again, you made the comment, I like to see crowds. I love seeing crowds. So this is Self-Help Festival. Again, mic drop, ultimate mic drop. And I love, Zach Arias said something in one of his lighting videos, like One Light version 1 or something years ago. Head in a clean spot. I don't know. You know how sometimes you hear some photographer say something and it's just like, I will never forget that saying. And it just echoes. Every time I shoot, I try and get head in a clean spot. In this particular case, I wanted his head up above the building as much as I could while still getting the crowd.
So you had to get higher.
Yeah, like this. This is the same show, actually. Different band, though. So I'm on a riser behind the drummer shooting down on this. And this is the drummer I'm next to.
And there you see his head sharp, but you got the little motion in the drumsticks.
Exactly. And the other thing this shot was one of those where the lighting was really, really bad. It was pouring rain. So I have shots of this where he's just in the pouring rain. And there you were getting this super warm, yellowy glow on his face from the cymbals. This is one. People called me out on this one because I did a little workshop thing and I made a comment about, if possible, try and get their face and try not to get this, right? What I call microphone nose or microphone mouth. And there is separation on the microphone in his face here, but this I always thought that looked kind of like an album cover. This is actually Self-Help again, and it's Papa Roach. And this show blew me away. I'm hooked on this band now. But this is what I'm talking about with the crowd, right? When you see a rabid fan interacting with a singer, I screwed this shot up though, because that sign, if I was smart enough to shoot a little wider, I could have gotten that sign in that says, "Hope you're happy." And that would have been awesome. Right. And sometimes that's what you need to do is just shoot wide, make it so that you can crop, and get that kind of effect. There was something I was going to show you here and I'm not sure I've got it in front of me. Let me see. I thought I did. Oh, I do have that shot. Here's a good example. Hold on. This is another jump shot that I love because one guy facing me, another guy not facing me, both of them with the crowd behind them. And this to me is the example of being ready. So again, he let the microphone go. You can see the cord behind him. The mic is just outside of his hand and his hand is open.
Okay. See it now.
Again, a band I'd never heard of, Hero the Hero. And I was photographing the drummer and I shoot with both eyes open. So as I'm photographing the drummer with the camera up to my right eye, I see out of the left eye, the lead singer climbing the speaker stacks. And just by being aware of that, I was able to quickly turn, focus on him and I got a sequence of him jumping off of the riser. But there's so many ways to go with music photography. And that's why I tell everybody, try it once, because whether you go for action shots like this, which some people get bored with, that's fine. Whether you go for mood shots like that, or you try and capture that kind of unusual moment. So this one, you won't be able to see it probably across Zoom. So I'll zoom in. You see the guitarist leaning into the crowd while he's actually throwing. If you see that little white line right there, that's his guitar pick.
Yep.
And he's throwing it to a crowd. And sometimes you just hit moments that the moment is more important than the music to me, right? It tells people what's happening at a show that they might not otherwise see. With Judas Priest, Rob Halford doesn't run around, jump in the air and move anymore. It's his outfits. The whole show is about his outfits. It's about the reflection. It's about, seeing the monitor that's in his glasses. There's a teleprompter down there that's giving him lyrics if he needs it, probably. To me, that's just as much part of the show. Ant is here. Ha! All right. For those of you, he's in here. He's going to kill me for doing this. For those of you that don't know Ant Pruitt, let me just introduce Ant Pruitt really quick. Ant Pruitt is a host of a number of shows at This Week in Tech, Twit. He does hands-on photography. He does This Week in Google. One of the nicest guys and one of the most amazing photography educators you will ever find is Ant Pruitt. There.
Cool. Well, welcome, Ant.
PSA done. So glad Ant is here.
So we've talked a lot about the 3 and out in the pit, but a lot of the photos you're showing here, you say you're behind the drum riser, you're off to the
Right.
side. How do those work out?
So when you are shooting a show, there are basically 3 different places that you could end up being. And one of those, I don't know if I have this shot in here, but I'm going to look and see if I do. So the main one that you'll be in is the photo pit, which is right in front of the stage. You'll get 3 songs and then security will kick you out and escort you out. In some cases, they will escort you out of the building. So Hollywood Bowl, you shoot 3 and they take you to the parking lot and you'll wait in the parking lot for the next band. And then they'll escort you back in. Excuse me. Number 2 is you might be shooting from the soundboard. When you're shooting from the soundboard, that's, I'm assuming most people here have been to a concert, but imagine that you're at a concert at a big arena. And halfway back the arena floor is the main house mix, actually mixing the sound for the show. You'll be shooting from there and you'll be standing on the ground and there's people in front of you and there's heads and there's hands in the air and you have to photograph them. Number 3 is wandering. So sometimes you'll shoot 3 from the pit and then they'll say you can walk around the crowd and shoot, which is great for shooting, not only the band, but again, it's great for capturing those moments of a show that just kind of tell the story of what the show is, the more photojournalistic stuff, right? And then you end up with the all access type stuff. And so this is me at Self-Help Festival right before he walked up. And my buddy Adam L. Macias took this. I told you it was raining this particular year, so you'll actually see I have a storm jacket hanging off of my think tank belt. That's what that yellow text is there. So those are really the main areas that you're going to shoot from when you're doing a concert. And when you get all access, there are a couple of key things. So I'm going to use this as the example. This is the band Great White. Most people won't know them, but they were really, really big in the 70s, 80s. This is Adi Desbro. So at this particular show, I went to the stage manager and I went to the tour manager ahead of time. Although this was a KCAL show, they were there this was our Christmas show. I had all access for this. But behind Audie, he was on a drum riser, and behind Audie was maybe 2 feet of space and a wall. So for me to get up there for him, which I really wanted to do, and I knew the shots that I wanted to get, I was going to be, this is a 15 millimeter Sigma fisheye. I'm 12 inches from his back here, probably. And there's wires everywhere and there's speakers everywhere. And I have a think tank belt on, and I almost broke the cardinal rule, and that is don't affect the show. So I'm back there. I get the shot that I want. I start to go out, and one of the pouches on my think tank belt system, started catching a wire. Luckily, I felt a little resistance on the belt, but I mean, I could have pulled something down. I could have unplugged something. So one of the key things is don't ever unplug anything, right? Just, you don't want to be that guy. And then one of the things you mentioned earlier, John, was what are some of the frustrations? And it's things like this. Usually bands, there's actually a better example here. I will come back to that shot to make the point, though. There are often bands who will be in your face. I just need to find the particular shot that I'm looking for, and I apologize. There are bands that will be just in your face and then gone almost instantly. And of course, looking under pressure, Steve loses the shot. Can't.
No pressure.
Yeah, well, there's always pressure when I'm around. I pressure myself. but I know that I had this shot in here, which is really, really strange. And of course, all right, so we're going to go with that. But this will still kind of tell you the idea. So this is Paul Stanley of Kiss.
Mhm.
In most scenarios,
Do you mean to be sharing?
oh, whoops, sorry. That would probably help, huh? In most scenarios, there will be a singer running around the stage, will see you, will point at you, will jump in your face, will stick their foot in your camera. Great shots. And you've got your 70 to 200 on. And you're like, no. So I carry two bodies. I carry on my right, it's a 5D Mark IV with usually a 70 to 200 or a 24 to 70. And on my left, I've got my 5D Mark III with always either a 15 millimeter fisheye or my 16 to 35 Mark III. So when they do that and they jump in your face and they suddenly just, are right there and then gone, I can grab my wide angle and snap a shot. This particular case was weird.
Something's not right. I'm seeing a drummer and your tips and tricks on the screen.
You are? Did I share the wrong screen?
I think so.
Hold on. Let me try it again. I must have grabbed the wrong one. It should be desktop too.
There you
Now
go.
You got it?
Yep.
Got it. Sorry about that.
There's Paul.
So there's Paul Stanley. That drummer was Jason Bonham, by the way. So Paul Stanley kneels down in front of you, looks at you, and just sits there. Like, no, take your time. No, you want that lens. Yeah. I mean, he's not actually doing that, but he was there so long. This felt like 15 minutes because he just plays to every single photographer. They are hands down just one of the most amazing bands for photographers. I mean, it's hard to explain what you'll get from a Kiss show, right? It's lights, it's fireworks, it's, Gene Simmons. You cannot go wrong with a Kiss show. If you ever get the chance, you got to do a Kiss show, although that's going to be tough nowadays, but still. So yeah.
Yeah, so folks in the audience, I mean, I know we had some problems with muting and unmuting earlier with some Zoom issues, but feel free to join in and ask some questions or make some comments. This is your chance to talk to Steve.
You mentioned earlier that you were photographing and your right eye dominant, and you noticed with your left eye somebody climbing up on the speakers and ready to jump, and you quickly turned around and you focused.
Right.
Your hand focusing or autofocus?
Oh, that's a really good question. So do you use or have you ever used back button focus, Michael? So I'm a back button focus guy. And when I first heard about back button focus, which for those that don't know what it is, I'll explain it. But when I first heard about back button focus, my first thought was, it sounds interesting. I'll give it a shot and, see what happens. The first week of the first like 2 shows using back button focus was the most alien thing I've probably ever done in photography. Mm-hmm. It's completely counterintuitive. As kids, we grow up understanding half press the shutter button for focus. When you remove that, it's a complete retraining. The problem with it also is twofold. One, there's no going back, right? Somebody hands me a camera that has a half button press focus, I'm horrible. Plus, there is inevitably a case where you're doing, like I do a lot of meet and greets when I was a house photographer. And there'd always be somebody that says, hand me your camera and I'll photograph you with the artist, right? Oh, it's Bruno Mars. Let's do that. Okay, cool. Well, they don't understand back button focus. They half press the shutter and you end up with a shot that is a pure blur of you with Bruno Mars. It happens, right? But for those that don't know back button focus, here's the idea. In music photography, the low light, you have certain focus points on your camera that are vertical, horizontal, both, or cross focus points. In other words, you have certain focus points that are more accurate. And so what happens a lot of times is, or based on the lens that you're choosing, you have less focus points and or more focus points. So what happens a lot of times, because you're shooting kind of photojournalistically, is you want to compose in camera. You don't just want to crop later. You want to get close. So you may want to use your center focus point to get the most accurate focus, but then move your camera and recompose. Well, if you hold your button half down for the shutter button and focus on a singer, and then you in any way let that go and recompose as soon as you touch it again, you're now focusing on something in the back of the stage area. By putting it to the back button, which is one of the buttons where your thumb is on the back of the camera, it separates that out. So now your shutter button is only metering, which doesn't matter to me at all, and taking the picture. So I can pre-focus on a microphone stand that I know the singer is about to run up to and is on the same plane of where his eye is going to be. And that's a key, by the way, because if depending on the plane you're shooting at 2.8, you focus on a microphone stand, the eye can be blurry, but if you're at the right angle where they're on the same plane, you can get it. So I can pre-focus on a microphone stand, recompose, wait for them to come back up without having to keep that half button held down, let all the buttons go. And whenever I want to, click, and it doesn't change my focus. So that's back button focus, which is really, 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 really handy. And here, by the way, I wanted to show you, this was the one shot I was going to show you before. Whoops, I think I have to share my screen first.
Yep.
There we go. This was the one I was going to explain before, where people just will jump in your face. So I had my 70 to 200 on shooting the drummer, didn't have my second eye open. This person suddenly is in front of me. This is a band called War on Women. And I literally dropped my 70 to 200 on my rapid strap right hand, picked up my 15 millimeter on my left, and grabbed the shot. So, which becomes an exposure problem, which is a different story.
Are you licensing everything through Getty?
No, I am not a Getty shooter. The shots that I've licensed, I don't license a ton, but I have licensed some. I don't think I have the Joe Walsh picture in here, which would be a good example. But I licensed a ton of shots actually to Jason Bonham. He was at the venue where I was the house photographer. And so like this one here, let me share this again. This was an interesting show. So do I have one of his front shots first? Hold on here. I don't with me. Okay. So Jason Bonham only allows shooting 3 from the pit. I'm the house photographer. This is a really good example of setting yourself up for success, whatever you shoot, right? I don't care if you're going down to your local community theater and photographing a play. Set yourself up for success. So let me bail out of this screen share for a second. Here's the thing. When I was a house photographer, I had all access, meaning I'm an employee or a contractor of the venue. I am able to go anywhere I need to do my job because I'm shooting the meet and greet either before or after the show, depending on the artist. So I have an all access pass. But the band rules are still, I only get 3 from the pit. So I have to shoot 3 songs and stop. Okay, cool. But I have all access. I'm not going to go, okay, I'm done, take my gear off and just go watch the show. I leave all of my gear on and I go stand in the wings. Now, I had asked ahead of time, every artist when I was the house photographer, hey, you know, I'm the house photographer. I have all access. Here's my pass. Would you mind if I shoot from the stage? And in this particular case, the tour manager said, no, Jason does not like anybody photographing from the stage. I said, okay, no problem. Shoot 3 from the pit. I'm done. But I left my gear on. I did this for every show, Seinfeld to Jason Bonham to, you know, whoever. And I would go stand in the wings because I'm allowed there because I have all access with 2 cameras on. And inevitably somebody would come up every single show, even when they explicitly said, no, you are not taking pictures from the wings. Now, periodically they'd say, sure, go for it. Right. I'd be standing there and they would come up and say, what are you doing? And I would always do like my old water polo thing. It's not me, right? I'm not shooting anything. I'm just watching the show. I have all access. I'm okay. And they would almost always say, no, 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 you're here, shoot something. So, all right, now I have permission. I'm already in the wings, and I start shooting Jason Bonham from the side. And I do usually wide shots like this to get the gong and to get the overhead mic, understanding that that may not be what they want. So they may want, I may shoot something like this. Not sure why I just went into that. Let me hide that. Boom. So I shoot something like this. Again, I get the mics, I get the gong, but you can also tight crop it. And then I get him looking right at me. And one of the advantages was if you look right in front of his drumsticks, there is a big, thick gooseneck with a little GoPro on it. That's what that black is right there. In this one, later on, they took the GoPro down. Yes. So I get these shots. He hits me up on Instagram. I'd love to talk to you about your shots. And I licensed him 50 shots. And this shot you'll still see in a lot of his ads for his tour.
So is your revenue stream primarily based on licensing to the groups, or where are your revenue streams? That's a newer question.
Yeah. In music photography, there isn't a lot, in all honesty. There's just not a lot of money in it unless you are a tour photographer and you're being paid to go on the road with the band. There's a lot of people that do that. David Bergman, a buddy of mine, is the tour photographer for both Bon Jovi and Luke Combs. Adam L. Mackay is a tour photographer. Christy Goodwin, one of my favorite photographers, tour photographer for some very big people, from Ed Sheeran to Taylor Swift to Katy Perry, but she's the house photographer for the Royal Albert Hall. So usually if you really want to make money at this, you are either going to become a tour photographer and shoot for the band or for the management, or you're going to be a house photographer, which was my main revenue stream for a long time, photography wise, where the venue would pay me to shoot. Or you're going to shoot for a wire service like a Getty or something like that. As a freelancer, I shoot for the radio station that I work at, KCAL FM. We are all required as part of our job for being on the radio to also contribute to the online blog and put content in and participate in that community. So I use my live music photography as part of my job for KCAL, with the added benefit that periodically I get licensing stuff.
Who owns the copyright?
I do.
But if you're working for the venue as an employee.
Yep.
aren't
I'm
they
not an
owners?
employee. I was a contractor. And
But you mentioned that you were an employee to somebody.
well, I mentioned I used the word employee to indicate that I had all access because I was working for the venue, but employee is the wrong word. I was a contractor. And as an example, when I first went into that meeting, I had never done a job like that before. I didn't even know what to charge. And so I went out to some friends of mine that had, and asked some advice. And so when I went into the meeting to pitch, they had called me, by the way. They had their marketing department, their graphic designers, taking turns photographing shows. They wanted a real photographer in there, which is really weird because some of their people that were doing it were really good. So they called me and asked me to come in and talk to them. So when I sat down, we kind of talked pricing based on what I had heard. And I did a tiered pricing system. Anything 4 hours or less is price X. As soon as it goes over 4 hours, it's price Y, regardless of how long it is. Because I knew that I was going to be shooting meet and greets, and often meet and greets are before a show, at which point I'm out in 4 hours. But a lot of times artists won't do a meet and greet until after a show. And then they'll sit and they'll cool down for an hour before they'll come do the meet and greet. And so I knew there would be shows that was going to be 8-9 hours. Cool. That's this much. And at the end of the conversation, I said, but here's the deal. I own the copyright for my images. And their response to me was, no. We own the copyrights to any images. I said, that's fine, but not for that price. If you want copyright, it's going to cost you more. They didn't even ask price. This is one of the mistakes I think a lot of people make, is you just don't breach the subject, right? It's a conversation. Look, we're going to be friends one way or the other, whether you hire me or not. You're not a bad human being. Let's go have a drink, right? But for that price, I'm not letting my copyright go. It's going to be much more than that. And their comment to me was, well, why do you need copyright? So glad you asked. A, I retain control of the images. If an artist comes and wants to license the images, I get to license the images for an extra revenue stream. Plus, I get to protect those images and how they're used based on the fact that they're my creation. And they said, well, why would you want to be able to share the images or license them? I said, to say that I shot at San Manuel, it's going to be, promotion for you guys as well. Okay, cool. They were totally fine with that. They saved money. And I gave them, with every batch, a written license agreement saying that for this batch of images, you have a full in perpetuity license to use these for internal marketing purposes.
Why don't you just tell these people that you want to retain copyright because that's your annuity in your old age when you can't run around and go into the pits?
Well, for some bands, that's the case. If I signed a release, that doesn't release me from that unless I reach out to management and get permission to use them down the road. But I just always want my copyright, and I register my copyright. So I have an entire...
Talking about timing, though, Jack Rosnicki just says hi over in Facebook, who's our copyright person.
Well, and Jack's, boy, talk about timing. So years ago on my podcast, I interviewed Behind the Shot. I interviewed Jack Rosnicki and Ed Greenberg. Now, Jack and Ed are the Copyright Zone. The book is sitting on the shelf behind me. I can't recommend that and their blog enough. So I interview them about copyright for photographers, and because there's so much misinformation out there, blatant lies and misinformation out there. So then 2018, the Copyright Office changes a couple of things. So I have them on again for a supplemental update on what's changed. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start registering all of my copyright, even going back. So during that, I found all the pitfalls that I didn't know about. And I created a video on my workflow for how I register my copyright. And I thought, I don't want to put this up because I know what's going to happen. Jack Rosnicki's going to go watch this video and he's going to call me and he's going to go, you're an idiot that you said that. So, hey, Jack, would you mind watching this video for me first and just telling me if there's anything I've got wrong? And he called me back and I was honored that he said, nope, it is absolutely perfect. There are a couple things, if you want to be nitpicky, I would probably redo and change. But other than that, it's great. I'm like, hey, I'm going to change them. I'm one of those weird people. I don't like edits. So I redid the whole video in one take because I wanted it to be like what Jack said, and sent it to him again. He liked it so much. Jack is a teacher in New York of photography business. He used my video in his classes. So I'm a firm believer in protecting your copyright. I can't stress it enough unless they pay you a ton.
Well, but the Copyright Office just changed it again.
In what way are you saying?
In terms of
fees will be changing. The process is still the same since 2018.
No, it's not. You have to now separate it out between.
Oh yeah, you do. Well, but see, you always had to do that anyway if they were published. So for published images, you had to put the original publication date. Now you have to put dates along with your file names. You have to do a full spreadsheet. But I was already doing most of that because at the time I was registering a lot of batches that were already published. So I had to do more than just file names. But again, all of that is in the video.
Yeah, but now there are several different forms that you fill out depending on whether you're going to do a batch, whether they've been used, whether they haven't been used. So,
yeah,
so
it's the question is,
the same thing happens with the individual images as well.
Say that last part again. I'm sorry.
There are 4 different sheets you have to fill out.
Correct.
2 of them.
Well, you don't have to fill. No. There are 4 different scenarios for sheets.
No, you got to fill them out. I was there last week.
Okay, I'm going to have to go look at that because I'm not familiar with. We can take that
offline and
yeah, I'll have to go look at that and check it out. But again, the process once you are registering it's still a process, and the video would still be useful probably, but I'll check that out and I'll see what the changes are.
So Steve, you mentioned a Behind the Shot podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So Behind the Shot podcast is a podcast I started actually 4 years ago this month. The first episode, I think I launched December 6th of 2016. And originally I was on the TWIP network, This Week in Photo, which is Frederick Van Johnson's network. And I was there for about a year and a half, and then took a couple months to kind of reformulate and went out on my own. I've been on my own since. And really what it is as I was learning photography, I always had this kind of thought in my head, man, I wish I could ask photographers questions about how they made their pictures to learn about them. I mean, I love a good interview. I love hearing, how'd you get started and whatever. But in the end, I wanted to see their work and find out why they made the decisions that they made. So I came up with this idea of, what if I could interview a photograph? What if, instead of interviewing the person, what if I interviewed the picture, one picture, dissected it to understand that photographer's mind? And that's what Behind the Shot is each show I get one photographer on. We pick one image, which is a bit of a process sometimes. And then we go through and, I usually do 10, 15 minutes at the beginning, kind of setting the scene of who they are, why you might want to care what they shoot. Although I'll be honest with you, I'm a firm believer that you can learn. I learn much less from other concert photographers now than I do from landscape and portrait photographers. So you can learn from any kind of photography. So I kind of set up, look, this is who they are. These are their credentials. This is why they have street cred. And this is why their opinions may matter to you. And then we pull up the shot, we dissect the shot for a half hour or so, and then we're done. It's usually about 45 minutes. I've had a couple go longer. I've had a couple go way longer, an hour, hour and 15. Like for example, I think Lindsay Adler went really long. Joel Grimes went long. Joel Grimes was just an amazing episode. But that's basically the concept of the show, is getting to know great photographers by taking a closer look behind one of their shots. And I don't really do advertising on it. I still do it because I love it. And it's a way for me to ask the questions I want to ask.
Yeah, so maybe you can throw a link into the chat for that. And also, is there a link to the video that you did for Jack Reznicki?
Yeah, and let me pull that up. And then
I'm going to toot your horn, Steve.
Yeah, it's as people who know me online, I don't promote myself enough. There's the podcast link. And then this is and these are all on YouTube too. So one of the things that I was always big on was, there it is. Oh, I missed it. Hold on. Boom. Oh, that's interesting. I have some images that aren't loading. I'm going to have to go look at that.
I'm going to toot your horn, Steve.
Oh, Ant.
Because you left out something about that show.
What's that?
So, well, you have it up on YouTube for the video, but you also have an audio feed. That's,
yes,
just an audio only feed. What people don't quite get is, if you listen to that audio feed only, which I have done several times, as well as watch the video, Steve goes through a couple minutes of trying to describe the subject matter at hand, that particular shot that they're going to dissect. And it's pretty freaking magical to watch and listen to him go through describing that shot if you're not watching the video. That takes a lot of talent that I know I don't have,
Thank you, Ann. And the reason for that, so probably about 50, the podcast is available in two forms: audio only in your podcast app, but it's also available in video in a podcast app if your app supports video. And the videos are on YouTube. So the video is actually in two places because I don't want to be tied to YouTube only for my video. But about 50% of my audience listens to the audio only. And I've had a number of them say to me, no, I actually like to drive down the road, listen to the podcast, and see if I can picture the picture in my head. And after I watch it, I go to the blog and I look at the picture. So I've gotten into this thing where I try and describe pictures, which, seriously, not an easy thing to do. So as an example, watch, hold on. I got to show you this. This was a guy that I just recently had on. His name is Darren McBurnett. He's an ex-Navy SEAL. Let's get that right there.
Yeah, I remember this one.
So he's an ex-Navy SEAL. 24-year Navy SEAL. And he was able to, this is BUDS, or this is SEAL training. Now, they've done documentaries on SEAL training before. And when they do those documentaries, they show you some of the SEAL training, but not a ton. Mostly it's they show you how they ring the bell if they want out. He was able to take full pictures of Navy SEAL training and do a book that just came out. It's sitting on the shelf behind me, called Uncommon Grit. And some of the shots are just brilliant imagery. So the rope, the toe torn up, them freezing. And this was the shot that we dissected. And trying to describe that shot was hilarious, right? Just absolutely hilarious. So yeah, and there's a bunch. Like, this was another one that was really, really hard to describe. This is a guy by the name of Atiba Jefferson, a Canon Explorer of Light.
Who did you just say?
Jack is coming in.
In
This is a guy by the name of Atiba Jefferson. He's well known as a skateboard photographer, but he was also one of the photographers for the Lakers during the Shaq and Kobe years.
And he's an explorer of light?
A Canon Explorer of Light. Yep. Brand new as of October 1st. Yeah, they just made him one. And he shoots mostly skateboarding type stuff. But that one particular shot, where is it? Right there. That's what we broke down. And boy, did I have it wrong. I totally misunderstood what that shot was going to be about.
Mr. John, how would you describe that shot with the skateboarder lying on the ground? This is the test that I would throw out to anybody trying to do what Steve does. How would you describe
All
that
right, John.
shot?
Let's
There
see
you
the
go.
shot again. I don't know. It just looks explosive. I mean, it looks like something's gone wrong. I see shrapnel in the air. It's like, where did he come from? What's going on? He's protecting his head. Yeah, I don't know where I'd go with this.
And you see the skateboard, and there's a video of
course.
this too. And actually, well, I don't want to spoil it. So yeah. And Jack Resnicki is in here. So Jack would be the
Somewhere,
guy.
Where is Jack? I don't see.
I
saw him.
just got on.
He snuck in.
I
So
snuck
Jack, you'll be able to answer this question. And first of all, my friend, it is awesome to see you or hear
in.
you.
Thank you. And I got to tell you, I have to leave in 10 minutes because I have a school at SVA Zoom meeting in 10 minutes.
Awesome.
So-
So for those that don't know Jack, Jack is part of the Copyright Zone. I mentioned the book is behind me. He's teamed up with Ed Greenberg. They're two of the nicest guys and most knowledgeable guys on copyright, and just so kind with their time.
Oh, I'm blushing. I'm blushing. And I always
And
thought
Jack's
you
been
did.
on this
I always
show,
thought
too.
you didn't. I didn't know you didn't. Always thought, Steve, you didn't know Jack.
Yeah. And that's what it got. So Michael was saying that there has been a change since my video of the registration process.
No, it's nothing has changed as far as unpublished and published. It's still that same. I use that Excel sheet to put
Right.
the titles and names.
Like I do in the video. Yeah.
Right. You do it a little differently, but it's the same thing.
Right.
Those things are required now if because they want you to have the individual names on the registration. In fact, I'm looking for.
File names and titles. And then if they're published, you have to put your original publication.
Right.
There
I have.
There are 4 different applications now, not just 2. 4.
No. It's basically just 2. It's either published or unpublished. That's it. And it's for, well, if you're doing one image, then it's a different application. You're right there. So we don't recommend to do one image. It costs you $35 to do one image. It's $55 to do 2 images to 750 images. And we try and recommend to everybody, do as many as you can these days. And it's a lot easier to do it unpublished than published.
So
Unpublished, you can have multiple years. Published, you have to have only 1 year at a time.
So you'll agree that there's three applications. There's a 4th. I was just online with them. last week.
What are they? What are they, Michael?
I don't remember. I mean,
Well, this would be good. Like
there
John
are
said, we
4.
can take
Yeah,
this
we can
offline
take-
somewhere.
We can do
Yeah.
another show on, Jack's been on here before. But yeah, I think we're getting a little into the weeds on the
Yeah,
process
yeah.
though, but know that you
Yeah.
do need to get copyright and protect yourself.
So
Yeah,
let
the
me
only-
let me say one more thing before we get too deep into, let me share the screen. There we go. And that is, before we end up wrapping up anything, we had talked about, doing jump shots. And when I did this shot, I mentioned, make sure you shoot wide enough.
Right.
If I could give photographers any one tip, it's make sure that you are aware of what your subject is and what your subject can do. If it's a horse, it may run away. If it's a singer, they may jump in your face. And if it's a guitarist, they may jump
Out of the frame.
So that's my tip for everybody, is just always be aware of I actually strangely liked this shot, which is weird. Just always be aware of exactly what your subject is and photograph and set your camera settings based on your subject.
Steve, are you
Steve,
an
I have a
explorer of
question.
light?
I'm sorry?
I have a question.
Yeah. First of all, Michael, what was yours?
Are you an explorer of light?
Oh no, I wish. And who was the other one?
Eric.
Yeah, Eric, what you got?
I noticed, some of the iconic band images from the 60s and 70s was kind of more casual and behind the scenes and stuff. And I always enjoy seeing that behind the scenes. I don't see that very much anymore these days. And do you do any of that stuff?
Yes, I do some of that stuff, and you don't see as much. And here's part of the reason. So in those days in the 70s, you didn't have as many photographers from publications doing photojournalism. What you had Rolling Stone photographers, right? Or you had photographers hired by, Led Zeppelin or the Who or the Stones or, whatever. Again, I always go back to Jim Marshall or recently
Harry
passed
Benson.
away, Baron Woolman. So those people were with the band for an entire tour and releasing those images. For a long time, the quote unquote tour photographer went away. It's now come back. And if you are a fan of a specific band, those bands usually are sharing on Instagram regularly. You're just not seeing them through mass media anymore.
And then there was Harry Benson.
Harry Benson. Yeah. Another good one. Yep.
Travel with the Beatles.
Good one. The thing that you were talking about with the Marines, the quintessential photographer and the books about the Marines was all done by Anthony Edgeworth.
Any other questions?
No.
Anyone else comments? Ant, thank you for joining us. If people have watched the chat, Ant was suggesting that people follow their favorite photographers that have stories that they share on behind the scenes stuff there on their social media.
Yeah. Yep. Anybody else? And then I will say that Jim made a comment in the chat that learning to understand how other photographers see the world often needs us to hear them talk about it. Just looking at the shot too often, we see what we already know to look for. And that's both a plus and a minus to me, right? I mean, as a storyteller, as a photographer, I want to put a picture out there that does cause the viewer to create their own story around it, which is why I love the behind the scenes or on stage stuff that a lot of people don't get to take, because it gives people the view of a concert that they don't normally get to see, and they can imagine and see what it's like to be there. And there's something in radio we have called for decades theater of the mind, right? When I put a picture in front of you and you create your own storyline, even if it's 100% wrong, I'm totally good with that, right? If you want to look at that girl in my face and think she's yelling at me, I'm okay with that if it causes an emotion in you and a reaction in you. On the other hand, like on the podcast, being able to talk to a photographer, and Jack's been on the show with one of his shots. I need to get you on again, by the way. Being able to say, but wait a minute, why did you position the kids in the order you did? Was that conscious, or did you just say to them, go to the wall? Why did you choose this wall to stand them against? Why did you choose how far away they are from the wall? And what lighting did you use to, or what techniques did you use to capture this?
Yes, but Jack has the advantage of being able to do that because of the type of commercial photographer that he is. You don't have that advantage.
Yes and no. That's actually a really good point. In some
I-
ways, I do not. So there are times when I'm at a show and I'm locked in position A, and you saw the one photo pit I showed you, and I am surrounded by 70 photographers and I can't move. But most of the time, I can be in a position and say to myself, and I gave you a few examples in the shots earlier, and I can say to myself, you know what, if I take one step to the right, and it may be the only space I've got, but if I take one step to the right, it's better. Or, you know what, I can't move to the right. A 24 to 70 is not going to work here because there's too much crap on the stage. So instead, I'm actually going to put on my 70 to 200 and switch to taking detail shots of the singer with the mic or whatever.
Yeah, Jack has something to say.
Yeah, because I have to leave here literally in 2 minutes to get to another meeting.
I know what you're like.
I think the important thing that you're saying, Steve, and I think it's important, is photographers need to be articulate, not just visual. That I find that our photographers who are articulate about their images and explaining, what it is and what they see, you start thinking along the lines that you just said. You start having a conversation in your own mind sometimes during the shoots to go, how much further can you go, rather than just reacting to what's in front of you. And I think it's a thoughtful process. And I think discussing images the way you do post fact afterwards and dissecting it really helps photographers as they shoot. I think it's just one of the great things about photography. It's not just stand there, take a look, press a button. It's about being thoughtful about what you're doing and putting thought into it.
And you made a point about sometimes you talk to yourself, and that actually, I think if you're not talking to yourself, you arguably could be doing something wrong. So one of the good examples, I can't remember who brought it up, and I apologize who mentioned it to me for the first time. But if you're photographing race cars on a racetrack and you shoot it at 1,000, 1/1000th of a second, and you freeze those tires, is the car parked or is it moving?
Well, I'm moving
Right.
at this point. I'm going to listen to the rest of this
Good.
later on. Thanks, John, for having
It's
me.
Thank you,
awesome to
Jack.
see you, Jack. And please tell Ed
Take care.
hello.
I
So,
certainly will.
As an example, one of my favorite subject matters, I am a nut about photographing drummers. I don't ever forget the drummer. They're a band member. This is, again, Jason Bonham. But in this particular shot, I was 3 from the pit for this particular show. This was a show with Heart where they actually played Zeppelin together. Awesome. At the Greek Theater in LA. And I couldn't get a good angle on Jason. So what I tried to do intentionally by talking myself through it was, let's show the motion of the sticks. And I want to see the drum set, because from where I'm at, I can't show how big the drum set is. So I got the drum set reflection
In the glasses.
in the glasses. That was not an accident. That was thought about and very, very intentional, because I was talking to myself. And I shot this at 1/125th of a second. Still got the glasses sharp.
With what lens?
70 to 200. It
70
said
to
there.
200. And it was the same show as this, which is that's Nancy Wilson of Heart.
Nancy.
Yeah. But again, as I'm sure we're almost done, I just want to say that's a normal concert venue. It's pitch dark. That shot is 4,000 ISO at a 40th of a second. So you're all photographers. You can imagine how dark that is, right? You'd walk and kids would be sitting on the floor and you couldn't see them as you fell over them. That's how dark it was.
So you're looking into the audience, looking back towards the soundboard.
Yeah, I'm in the photo pit right here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And this is the same show. And that shot is, I think, 6,400. That's 5,000 ISO, 200th of a second. Ton of noise in that shot. That's on a Canon 7D, original Canon 7D at ISO 5,000.
Yeah, it's Canon 7D didn't do well over 800 on noise.
No, but if you got to do it, you do
You
it.
got to
And
do
then
it,
the
right?
key
You got
is
the picture.
the key. Yeah. And the key is don't do global noise reduction, right? Just don't. And just go and enjoy it and feel the music. Like this is printed 2 foot by 3 foot on the wall next to me on metal. And that person rose their hand, and in my head, I was screaming because I'd been trying with a 10 millimeter to get the shot. And finally, I kind of figured out the angle that I wanted. I'm backed up against a wall in the balcony of the House of Blues. And I wanted to get the shot. I wanted the lights blown out, but I wanted to be able to still see. That's Gabby Ray right there and her guitarist. And as I finally figured it out, I'm snapping the shot. Somebody put their hand up. And the words in my head weren't, I can't say. Then I chimped the back of the screen and went up to him and thanked him. Because part of what it is
Serendipity.
Yeah, you just gotta sometimes just throw caution to the wind and just go for the feel. And here's another example where I don't know if anybody knows Aaron Lewis, but he smokes and drinks a ton on stage. He was with the band Stained, country star now mostly. But I wanted to tell, so I couldn't decide black and white or color. And to me, the black and white works because I'm more aware of the smoke, except here the smoke is blue. And this was one of those ones where I'm trying to capture the smoke and I'm trying to capture the drinking because he had a Miller beer in his hand. And I stood on the side of the stage and the tour manager came up and said, "Get me something good," as I'm on the side of the stage. And I looked at him and said, "Is it okay if I crawl out there? I'm in stage black. No one's going to see me." He goes, "Yeah, go for it." So, sometimes you just gotta, it's like every type of photography, right? It's the art of compromise. You just got to know what you want to compromise on.
Well, this has been great.
The pleasure's been mine. I love talking photography.
Thank you. Anyone else got a last minute comment?
Thank you, Steve. It was great.
Oh, believe me, it was my pleasure. I thank all of you. And if you do me a favor, if you do watch the podcast, please give me feedback. I always am open to feedback. There's somebody in there that you like. A lot of the shows, I should warn you, the stuff from TWIP is still up. It's still on the blog post. Those are actually hosted on the TWIP YouTube channel. So those will take you there if you go watch them. Just send the traffic to Frederick on those old episodes. And there's some great ones. Scott Kelby was in those, and Scott's going to be back on again here pretty soon. And Karen Hutton is my next episode, comes out Thursday.
Great.
Karen,
Why
don't you,
throw
John?
your Instagram then also, or your Twitter into the chat for people.
Yeah, both Instagram and Twitter are.
And mention them out loud so people know too.
It's just at Steve Brazill, and it's like the country Brazil, but 2 L's.
Very cool.
I have a question, but only after you
Okay, we're going to
sign off.
I'm going to sign off on Facebook right now. So that live stream is stopping, and we'll say goodbye to everyone that's going to watch the recording now and the recording.